We're still here in Indianapolis here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter, host of the North Shore Drive podcast. We're here for the Combine, and we've gotten a chance to talk to a lot of players now. The cornerbacks had a really impressive day just talking with us. Joining me will be Ray Fittipaldo. Both of us have been on hand. We've talked to guys like Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr., a lot of different cornerback prospects. But how do they measure up, and how will this class play out from cornerback to linebacker to safety? We'll talk all that right here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Again, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. And we're joined again by Ray Fittipaldo, our man, Steelers beat writer. We've both been on the ground here in Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. Remember, you can download this show on any podcasting app, especially on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. And you can also watch this show on YouTube. If you are watching this show on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes out from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and our Monday, Wednesday, and Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. Ray, it was kind of crazy seeing the cornerback class kind of roll itself out because Christian Gonzalez, I felt like, was going to be the biggest show as far as, who was at the podium. He's kind of everyone's 1A. Everyone's going to be watching to see what he does on Friday when he goes to his field competition. But it felt to me like the biggest show as far as someone being at the podium with Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State. And I was impressed by the way he carried himself. Not that it should be shocking, but I've never, had a chance to interview the young man, and I was impressed by the way he carried himself. He was joking, he was telling good stories, but he was also giving, concise answers. And the more I kind of look at this cornerback class and hear people talk about it, it's making me think that none of the big three, Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon from Illinois, or Joey Porter Jr., are going to be there at 17. I think these guys have the chance to put themselves in the top 15 range.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, and I've seen Joey Porter grow up. I remember him when he was 15, 16 years old. He was hanging out down at the Steelers facility every day when his dad was an assistant coach on the staff. And, he told the story today. I know you were there. He used to do one-on-ones with Antonio Brown.
That's crazy.
And he admitted, AB probably wasn't going 100%, but that's the type of thing that is beneficial when you're a coach's son or you have access to NFL teams the way he did. So I think he's way ahead of the game. From the last time I saw him, I think he probably grew a couple inches, put on about 20 pounds of good weight. He looks every bit the part of a CB1, if not the CB1, CB1A, 1B in this class. As you mentioned, it's a really good outside corner class, especially at the top.
And that's what's going to be really interesting. We see how good it is at the top, and that we talk about offensive line. We know that there's going to be a run at quarterbacks, but there's only there's 16 picks ahead of the Steelers right now. You and I talked on Wednesday about how we don't expect them to trade up at all in the first round, but this is a group where I think those guys are gone, but I don't think that should alarm Steelers fans, because Steelers feel like if they miss out on these three, what are we doing? But I think if the Steelers, there are a lot of day two guys. Like there were a lot of guys who I think got to talk to the press a little bit today. Kyle Blue Kelly, I thought Emmanuel Forbes was really impressive. Clark Phillips, all of those guys. I think there's been a lot of impressing going around, not just with talking to the media, but what they've said, some of the interactions that they've had with coaches and meetings and such. And it seems like just going across the board, Ray, the Steelers had formal meetings and informal meetings with a lot of cornerbacks in this class.
They did. Yeah, I think we should expect that. I think, I think they're going to draft a corner no matter what, but what are they going to do if they can't re-sign Cam Sutton? So yeah. I know they want to. I know they definitely want to, but if that doesn't happen for whatever reason, you got to be prepared. Maybe you got to draft two cornerbacks. And we just talked about the outside corners. You got safety slot hybrids that are really, really good. How about a guy like Brian Branch?
Yeah.
from Alabama. I mean, that guy can play safety, but he was basically a nickelback for the Crimson Tide. And he's a guy who people think can step in and play right away. So it's just, it's about finding fits for these guys. When guys aren't outside corners, you just wonder how they fit in sub packages or base defenses and stuff like that. But Brian Branch, Jair Brown from Penn State, Antonio Johnson, who I had going to the Steelers at 32 in my last mock draft. He's another guy, 6'3", like 200, plays near the line of scrimmage. I mean, there are all kinds of defensive backs of all shapes and sizes who are going to help out NFL teams in the very, very near future.
I want to get your thoughts on this because we talked a bit about Andy Weidl assembling the board. With the Steelers, they led the NFL in interceptions this past year, and it's clear, I think, Terrell Austin wants a defense where his guys in the secondary can be playmakers because he was a secondary coach, and I think that's something he wants to style. Yeah. Would the Steelers traditionally, in my understanding of their building philosophies of what they want in cornerbacks, are guys that are, were zone cornerbacks who were tenacious at tackling the person in front of them, keeping the person in front of them, being physical, good tacklers. And if they had ball skills, great, but that wasn't a priority. Do you think there's a paradigm shift in that with Andy Weidl and what he might be, looking at? Like, tackling is still important, yes, right. But would they kind of be like, well, if you have these kind of ball skills, we'll overlook some of these other things and still value you higher on the board?
Yeah, I mean, that would be more of a change of mindset with the coaching staff.
Okay.
I think we talked about this earlier on one of the podcasts, but Andy Weidl's job and Omar Khan's job, it's finding the right players who fit Mike Tomlin's system.
Right.
By extension, Terrell Austin's system. So, I think you've seen more man. I don't think that the tackling is ever going to go away. The Steelers love defensive backs who can tackle. That's why an undrafted free agent like Mike Hilton was a mainstay here for so many years. I mean, that's a very, very important part of their defense. So, I would probably agree with you. Like a big physical guy like a Joey Porter is probably more in their wheelhouse than a guy like Christian Gonzalez. But again, we talk about this all the time. You get the best football players, okay? Mm-hmm. That's where Andy Weidl's grades come in. You get the best football players, and then you make them fit within your system. So, Kevin Colbert always talks about, well, we got red paint. We're going to paint the barn red. That's what you got to do. The best players available, take them, find a way to fit them into your defense.
Absolutely. I want to talk to you more about those tweeners you were talking about. We'll do that just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, so stay tuned. But first, got to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Valley Pool & Spa. Valley Pool & Spa is, of course, the number one place for you to go to if you need a sauna, a hot tub, or a spa installed right in your home. Best place to go shop for that is Valley Pool & Spa, or going to their website, valleypoolspa.com. And if you go there, they have saunas, they have hot tubs, they have the Finleo saunas that you can go in. All these are things that are going to help you. They'll find a way to put it in the best place in your home and find a way so that you can have a place where you're at home. You don't got to go anywhere special. Just go, relax, de-stress, come out refreshed and renewed and ready to tackle your day. So the best place to go and find that and add that to your home is Valley Pool & Spa. And go to their website, valleypoolspa.com, and you'll be able to see now all the discounts and savings that you can get on hot tubs, saunas, and swim spas right there at valleypoolspa.com. Again, that's valleypoolspa.com. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Ray, let's talk about some more about those tweeners. You brought up Johnson. You brought up Branch. There's guys in this draft class who are safeties who you're right. They can bump down. They can help in the slot. They can help in the box a little bit. But they also, I think there's really talented guys who can move around and help there, but also be good deep safeties to pair with Minkah Fitzpatrick. Brian Branch even said, he would love to pair up with Minkah Fitzpatrick. They're both Alabama guys. He knows how Minkah works, his reputation, and that would be a dream for him for those to be able to work together. Is that though? You put that in your mock draft. Do you see Brian Branch being one of those guys if, like, say the top corners are gone and the top offensive linemen are gone, the offensive tackles? Is Brian Branch the kind of player the Steelers could take at 17 and it be the right fit?
I could see that happening. He is such a good football player that they would have to figure out, okay, we know he's going to step in and be a quality guy right away, but what's the value, right? And we kind of talked about this before. Slot corners only play in sub packages, right? So what would his role be in the base defense? Yes, he could be a safety, but could he do both as a rookie? So, those are things that you kind of have to figure out. Do you start him out at safety, teach him that position within your system, and then have him do the slot as well? So I think they could work that all out. But it's a lot simpler to draft a Joey Porter Jr., stick him on the outside and say, lock down that guy. That's all you got to worry about. It's much different when you got to play inside. You got to play deep safety, strong safety, play in the box, do different things. That's where it gets complicated. So, Antonio Brown at 32 makes sense. I think Brian Branch is a better player than Antonio Johnson. I could see that happening at 17. It's just about where the Steelers would value a pick like that. So I could definitely see that happening. He's a really, really good football player.
I'm right with you. I think that could definitely happen with Brian Branch. And again, I think he'd be very much a Steeler because also Brian Branch loves to hit. Like he loves to tackle. That's a big part of his game. And that would fit the Steelers' MO. And I think also having guys who can communicate and be those guys in between, that is so important for your defense. One philosophy that I've always thought was really important was having your defense be strong up the middle. You think about the 2000s defense that the Steelers built. Casey Hampton was your nose tackle. You had James Ferrier at the off-ball linebacker right behind him. And then you had Troy Polamalu as your safety. And Polamalu's range, and not that Brian Branch is going to be Polamalu, but his range to be able to go from the box to here, to there, to the slot, to deep coverage. That was such a utility that opened things up. Minkah Fitzpatrick is already an amazing safety who gives you a lot of utility as a deep ball guy and can help with that. And Terrell Edmunds, I think he's a very good glue guy that he's a puzzle piece you could fit into a lot of different places. We've seen him guard the slot. We've seen him guard tight ends. We've seen him help against the run. And he's not a huge playmaker when it comes to turnovers, but I think he's really solid for what the Steelers want to do, and he doesn't cost you a whole lot because he doesn't get the turnover numbers. But that's where I think it's going to be interesting. What would the Steelers weigh in that situation? Because free agency is coming soon. We're here at the Combine in 2 weeks now. Free agency will be open, and we'll start to hear some of the answers. Do the Steelers, sign Edmonds back? Do they sign KZ back? Because he's also an unrestricted free agent in this upcoming off season. And if they do both of those things, would a Brian Branch even make sense there? Because those are two guys that you value as starters. You essentially have four kind of starting caliber safeties when you also need to, again, address several other positions. Yeah,
so obviously I've always kind of viewed it as you bring KZ or Edmonds back. I don't know that you could bring both back. If you do bring both back, then obviously the need for a guy like Branch or any other hybrid probably isn't needed. So it would depend on how free agency unfolds, in that scenario. And just one more point about these hybrid guys. Mm-hmm. I wrote about this in a story that's online today at Post-Gazette.com. Minkah Fitzpatrick, when he came out, number 11 overall pick, very much in the same mold, right? I mean, people are saying these guys are very similar. He goes to Miami. They don't know how to use him. They have him in the slot. They have him close to the line of scrimmage. He hates it, and he gets traded. Boom. Comes to the Steelers. He's a deep safety. He's a playmaker. He's a 3-time All-Pro. So what I'm saying is all these guys are talented. They all have traits to be successful in the NFL, but are you going to the right system, right? Is the fit right for that team? Is the fit right for that player? So that's the part of the draft that really isn't talked about now in this stage of the process, but I think Fitzpatrick is a perfect example of that. He had everything it took to be a great player in Miami. Mm-hmm. They didn't know how to use him. The Steelers did. And, we know how that story ends. So that's something to consider here with these safeties and, slot corner types who are versatile. Versatility can be a blessing. It can also be a curse.
It can be because again, yeah, like you miss on the fit, and that can be tough. But I also think that's why they want to keep Cam Sutton, right? Because he can play outside and inside. Plus, he fit in with the Steelers because, like, sometimes it's also not just on the field; it's off the field. You want guys who are going to be, Mike Tom always says, volunteers, not hostages. You want guys that buy into your system, that buy into your people. And Cam Sutton's the guy you've seen it, I've seen it. He's become a vocal leader in the locker room. He's kind of taken on being the face of the cornerback room for the Pittsburgh Steelers, where Joe Hayden was that for many years for them. So I think that finding a young cornerback who wants to can learn behind Cam Sutton and eventually can maybe become that leader, that voice in the room. I think that could be huge for the Steelers. But also, if you can find that guy, and Omar Khan makes this point, Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin, if you see great talent, you take great talent. And take find a way to manage it after the fact. But I agree with you. If they're in those positions, like do the research, do all the interviews. That's what the Steelers are doing right now and interviewing all these players. They want to learn about their personalities. They want to see what's behind them so that they can say, okay, well, you know what? I think if we draft X player, they're gonna react this way if we tell them this. They're gonna be open to these adjustments to their career or to the to the system that they were asking them to play. Those are all very important things, like you said. And I think that if the Steelers are pressing forward and looking at getting multiple guys in the secondary in this draft class, it's a great place to do it because not just outside cornerback, but that slot position and safeties, there's a lot of really good athletes who we're about to see run on Friday.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned it last week. Daniel Jeremiah, I think 10 corners in his top 100. 10 corners with top 3 round grades. So there you go.
There you go, and that's gonna be something to watch. But Ray, you wrote about the linebackers. I want to talk to you about that linebacker class. We'll do that in a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, before we go anywhere else, we got to talk to you guys about Yins in the Berg. Yins in the Berg is one of our great sponsors here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's North Shore Drive podcast, and Yins in the Berg is the #1 place to go for all your Pittsburgh sports merchandise that you want to buy for yourself, for your friends, for your loved ones, for gifts, whatever you want to do. They have Steelers gear, they have Pirates gear, they have Penguins gear, they have Pitt gear. All things Pittsburgh sports you can get right there at Yinzers in the Berg. So go to their website, yinzerspgh.com, which you can visit, and is updated weekly with new merchandise. You can also go to either of their stores in the Strip District where you can find the merch, check it out for yourself, see what works for you. So do either one of those. Check out Yinzers in the Berg. They got an awesome selection of Pittsburgh sports gear that you can enjoy for yourself. And if you can't get to the Strip District, again, check out their website, yinzerspgh.com. That's yinzerspgh.com for all your Pittsburgh sports apparel. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Go to post-gazette.com for all of our coverage. Ray, the linebacker position is going to be one interested to see how it plays out. Full disclosure, we're recording this in the early evening of Thursday, so I think the linebackers will be done by the end of the evening, so we'll see those numbers there. But you wrote about this linebacker class, and linebackers certainly a need for the Steelers. They need to find a guy there. Devin Bush didn't work out, but is the right type of linebacker available for the Steelers in this draft class? And is that type of linebacker, are there multiple guys like that? Because I think Miles Jack, solid run stuffer, good, veteran who can hold down the spot. But I think they need a real athlete who can help at that position, both against the run and the pass, and those are just very hard to find.
They are, and it's a tough projection for NFL teams. I think if you're looking for the top prospect in this class, it's probably Drew Sanders from Arkansas, 6'5", 233. He's going to test really well out here. So, he's good. He's very good. But, Omar Khan talked about this. He's a projection.
Right.
And a lot of players like him are projections. He played 2 years of outside linebacker at the University of Alabama, transferred to Arkansas, where he was promised, and he did very well at inside linebacker. So, again, we just got done talking about versatility with D-backs. Now we're talking about versatility with inside linebackers. I mean, Chris, you can talk about versatility on the defensive line. It just seems like that's kind of like the buzzword in NFL draft talk now. So it's no different with linebackers. Got to be able to stop the run. Got to be able to cover tight ends, running backs, even receivers sometimes. It's just a really, really difficult job. Steelers thought they might have their guy in Devin Bush. We kind of know that didn't work out. So now we're back to the drawing board, and we'll see if they can get it done this year. I don't know that, if you're looking at one of the 4 picks in the top 81, there might be 4 or 5 inside linebackers worth taking. So it's not deep like the corners are deep. It's not deep like edge rushers. It's probably not even deep like defensive tackles. So that's kind of the challenge here. Those guys are going to come off the board at some point. If there's a run on them, you might want to get in on it. If not, hey, maybe you got to make it work with Miles Jack and Spillane and whoever else, Mark Robinson, whoever else can piece it together.
I agree, and that's a position where I think it's going to be interesting to see will they submit to that. Will they allow that? Will they be like, you know what, let's just go get a veteran and just call it a day there? Because we talked, like, you had Lucas Van Ness going to them in the first round as a defensive lineman who could help there. Cornerbacks are real need, offensive lines are real need. Something is going to have to give. I feel like in this draft class, there's going to be a position where people are going to look at it like, man, they didn't go after this group. That could come back to bite them, this year with how good that class was. I mean, tight end, that's another group that we've talked about. Yeah. That's a really good class. There's some people saying that the tight end group is the best group of all the classes in this year's NFL draft. So I think but again, good things to have is when you have a lot of people to choose from. The bad thing is if you miss on them for the wrong guys, and that's where I think that it could be very interesting. If there's not a lot of linebacker prospects, are the Steelers at risk of overvaluing those 4 guys that we're looking at here and saying, well, we look at them and we think, oh, well, they're really good. It's just because they're really good of a class that's not that deep.
Yeah, and I think for the Steelers, maybe this year you're not feeling pressed the way they were when they chose Devin Bush, right? I think when they chose Bush, they had some guys on the roster who were okay. But now it's like, okay, Miles Jack can do the job. It's just that maybe we want to find the guy for after Miles Jack. So I don't think there was hard pressed to find a guy to man that spot this year. I think, just as easily, I ranked my top 5 needs entering the combine, before we came out here. I think I had inside linebacker number 5, after O-line, after D-line, probably even after edge rusher. So, I mean, it's a position of need, but, they could probably hold it down with Jack and Robinson and Spillane. I'm not saying they would be a great inside linebacker unit, but if they can't find their guy in this draft, I think they could still make it work.
We'll see if they make it work with this draft class. If they go after anyone in this draft class, and if they don't, how do they make it work? Because I can also see if they don't, if they could potentially maybe add someone in free agency that's not that expensive and say, you know what? Because one thing that Kevin Colbert did, and I think Omar Khan, this part of his the way he changed won't change from Colbert to Khan, but I think that one philosophy that we'll maintain is the Steelers will want to go into the NFL draft feeling like they have each position properly addressed, at least to exist in the next year. Like, I can see the Steelers signing back Robert Spillane and then maybe going and adding a non-expensive off-ball linebacker and then giving themselves a position like, look, we'd like to get a better linebacker in the NFL draft who's going to turn into the franchise linebacker who, redefines the position for them. But if they are prepared that way, then maybe they like you brought up Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson, I think there's a lot of fans that liked him, but you and I know there was a reason why he wasn't playing for quite some time. He needed time to adjust, and maybe he'll make that adjustment this year. But I think the Steelers, they'd rather have more chips on that table to say, like, you know what, we have this many options. If Miles Jack doesn't work out, work out this year, we have this guy that we've signed, and if that doesn't work out, we know that Robert Spillane and Mark Johnson could come off the bench. Yep. But I still think even if they did get a guy like that, it wouldn't preclude them from getting like a Diane Henley, a Jack Campbell, if those top linebackers are off the board.
Hey, listen, it's been a revolving door here since Shazier was injured. I mean, guys in every year. We can go down the list. Schobert. I mean, they've tried so many different guys. Listen, if they think they have a guy, if they think Drew Sanders is so special, they'll probably go get him. But like I said, there's a lot of projection there, and you have to count on your coaches to make that work. So very, very interesting class, a small class of linebackers, but definitely a position of need for the Steelers. And I think it's something we'll be talking about here in the coming 2 months here before the draft.
We certainly will. There's a lot to do with the Combine. We're going to be leaving soon from the Combine, but the Combine goes throughout the weekend. We'll be back Monday right here in the North Shore Drive podcast with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, giving you all of our thoughts. There was a lot of stuff going on there. Ray, I'll bounce this off your head real quick. I'm here covering the Pitt guys, and I'm talking to the guys and stuff. And Kalijah Kancey said, on Wednesday that he was going to surprise us with his 40-yard dash down. Not only did he surprise us and post the fastest, he ran a 4.67 officially in the 40-yard dash. That is, according to Pro Football Reference, the fastest time by a defensive lineman in the history of the Combine, dating back to 2000 when they started tracking this stuff. And the person he knocked off by a hundredth of a second was Aaron Donald. Yep. And does that performance from Kalijah Kancey raise your eyebrows a bit to think that maybe he should be on the Steelers' radar with that 17th overall pick?
I don't know that he'll be on the Steelers' radar at 17, but I think he might get into the first round now. I think before here, I think there was a lot of buzz around him, but people were saying, "Oh, let's see what he does out here." For the Steelers, it's interesting. He wouldn't fit them. But again, DeMarvin Leal didn't necessarily fit, and they drafted him. I mean, he's not an outside linebacker. He's not a prototypical 5 technique. But they used him, and they love his versatility. Omar Khan talked about that the other day. So can you also do that with an interior guy? Maybe he can play 1. Maybe he can play 3. Maybe he could even play some 5 technique. It would be a little bit different for the Steelers to take a guy like Kancey, but again, if he's the highest rated player on your board, make it work, find a spot for him, and watch him go. You saw him at Pitt this year. He's a great player. He's just a little bit undersized for the NFL. Wasn't an issue for him in college. We'll see if it's an issue for him in the pros.
I think it'd be interesting. What was very interesting was the Combine measurements. They gave him a boot. Made him 6'1". They measured him at 6'1". He was 6 foot. He was known to be 6 foot at Pitt. That was the measurements they gave him. And not that 6'1" again changes like, oh, he's 6'1". Now he's first overall pick. That doesn't do that. But I wonder if it does kind of poke a little bit more to get him into that first round grade, because there's some people like Mel Kiper who put him 10th overall to the Eagles. I'm very high on Kalijah Kancey. I've covered him for his entire career at Pitt, and I think that he is a phenomenal player who, if in a right defensive system, will be a problem for offensive lines, because I think that but I think that like with the Steelers, I think you're right. The Steelers want bigger guys who can eat up blockers, also win in the pass rush. I think Kalijah Kancey, if they got him, they'd find a way to make it work. But I also agree that I think that the situation that he might be looking for is more like with the Philadelphia Eagles, where they have a Jordan Davis, they have a Fletcher Cox, they have big defensive linemen who they're going to be your big mauling guys that they can take things up, while Kalijah Kancey is the lightning bolt that cuts through the offensive line and makes the big plays. Where will he go? We'll find out. He didn't do the full drills because of his shoulder injury that he's been nursing and getting back. But that 40-yard dash time, still amazing. We'll keep track of all the things here right on the North Shore Drive podcast, where we're talking about the Combine. Stay tuned. We're going to be back on Monday breaking things down. There's a lot still going on at post-gazette.com. Ray, thanks so much for joining me here on the North Shore Drive podcast. He's Ray Fittipaldo. I'm Chris Carter in Indianapolis. We'll be doing this show again Monday. I'll be on the road. I'll probably be in Greensboro by then, so it's going to be interesting for our plans. But Ray, thanks again for joining us. Thank you for listening to us and watching us here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks again for checking out the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Check out the Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com for all of our coverage from the Combine. We'll see you again Monday right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.